right, so you want to learn to juggle four balls, you have come to the right place. First thing, I want to just send out a thank you to everybody that was able to throw a few bucks in my tip jar, which I have linked to below, for the three-ball juggling video. It really helps. I appreciate it a lot. And I think I sent out emails to everybody who was able to donate a little something. And so thank you all. It helps me to keep making videos like this as well. So the good news about juggling four balls is there's really only two steps. The bad news is that second step is tough. But the better news is just getting the first step is a lot of fun and is really kind of another aspect of juggling. So what I want you to do is just have two balls. The first step of juggling four is learning to juggle two in each hand independently. So when you were watching me juggle the four balls a second ago, what did it look like I was doing? It probably looked similar to you to juggling three balls. But it's actually a completely different technique. Juggling five balls is the same technique as juggling three balls in the sense that you're throwing up to those two different spots and one hand is throwing to one spot, one hand is throwing to the other. The difference is when you're juggling five, you're having to keep three balls in the air at one time. When you're juggling three, you're only keeping one ball in the air at a time. So that makes it a lot easier, and I mean a lot easier. Juggling five balls, even the simplest way possible, is quite difficult. Juggling four, if juggling three in terms of difficulty was, let's say, I don't know, a 2 or a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, juggling five balls, let's say, is a 9. Juggling four balls is going to be maybe a 5. You know, it's a lot closer in terms of difficulty to juggling three than it is to juggling five. And it looks really pretty impressive too. So like I said, what's happening is not a crossed pattern, although it does look like that. If you watch that one more time, I'm going to use bean bags this time instead, different colored bean bags. So if you look at me watch juggling four, watch the silver and gold ball or watch the blue and green and notice they don't ever cross hands. So if you watch that for a second, I've got the gold and the silver in the right, I've got the blue and the green in the left, and they don't ever cross. So we'll get to the four balls later, but for now, let me go back to the lacrosse balls. I think it's kind of easier to see the arc and the pattern when you're looking at two things that are the same color, and it's a nice bright color. And these are just lacrosse balls, just regular lacrosse balls. So bounce juggling is fun too. We'll have to get into that sometime. So when you learn to juggle three, and I'll put a link to that if you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link to that in the description. But if you haven't juggled, or if you have juggled three, you know you're crossing, you're going up to those opposite points. When you're juggling four, each hand is really just doing this. Not that that's that easy, but it's a whole lot easier, I think, than it looks. Here's the tough thing. So you'll probably be able to get your dominant hand doing that relatively quickly, but you've got to get your non-dominant hand really good, because your four ball juggling is not going to be good if you have one great hand and one okay hand. Your four ball juggling is only going to be okay at best. So you're going to have to practice your offhand a lot more than you practice your on hand. I mean, assuming you're like most people and you've got one strongly dominant hand. So for me, my right hand is stronger. When I show things, I'm going to be showing it probably with my right hand. But you've really got to work on that left hand and just really try to get that left hand as good as you can, because that's going to be what determines how good your four ball juggling is. So going back to my right hand. So what am I doing here? Well, I'm really picking a point, one point, and I'm throwing up to that point. So I don't have that natural crossing in front of my body to help me avoid hitting balls. So one of the most common, probably the most common mistake or problem that you're going to have when you're learning to juggle 4 is the balls colliding. Both when you're juggling 2 in one hand and definitely when you start juggling all 4 together, because it's got a pretty narrow window that you can go. So I'm looking at that one point. I'm doing kind of the same motion as the 3 ball, so kind of the scoop and the throw, scoop, throw, except I'm not going to the opposite point. I'm going to the same point. So if you just watch what one ball would do, up, catch, up, catch. So I'm exaggerating this a little bit, but I want this kind of motion where I'm always going up to that same point. So what does that look like with 2 balls? And again, the same as with 3 balls. Wait till the ball hits the top of the trajectory before you throw the next ball. So I'm going toss, 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 toss. And I'm looking just at that one point, and I'm always trying to get up to that same point. But notice what I'm doing with my right hand. If you notice, it's moving considerably from the outside when I'm catching it to the inside, and then I've got to get it up to a point in between where my hands are, right? So if my hand, let's say, is centered right here, when I'm throwing it, I've got to be on this side. When I'm catching it, I've got to be on that side. So I'm catching, crossing, throwing. Catch, cross, throw. Because of course, if I throw the ball up in the same place, they're going to collide. So again, watch that one more time. Watch what my hand is doing. Catch on the outside, come to the inside, throw. Right. Probably your easiest height for just juggling 2 balls in one hand is probably about the same. If I back up a little bit, it's not as high as it looks in the camera, but it's probably roughly at the top of your head. Here's the thing though, when you start juggling 4 balls, you're going to need a little bit more time, so you're going to have to throw a little bit higher. It's going to be, you don't have to, but it's going to be easier if you throw a little bit higher than normal. So if this is the top of my head, I'm thinking of maybe 6 inches, a foot higher than that for the throws. That also helps to give a little bit more space between the balls as well, because you're able to just get a little bit more separation. You have a little bit more time to get that separation. So that's also going to be a little bit more difficult. So what I would suggest is, definitely start with your dominant hand until you get the feeling of it. Don't let yourself get too good with your dominant hand before you start working on the hand that's not dominant, right? The hand that's got a little bit of problems. And it'd be great if you were fully ambidextrous. That would be awesome. That will make this a lot easier. So I'm working on that. Catch on the outside, throw on the inside, catch on the outside, throw on the inside. Once I've got that, again, reasonably good, just like in the 3-ball video, you're thinking maybe, I wouldn't even go 80%. I would go, once you kind of have it, 50%, 60%, switch to the other hand. Don't get frustrated. It's definitely going to take you, if you're most people, it's definitely going to take you a considerable amount of time to bring that second hand up to 90%. Let's say you want it 90% as good as the first hand before you go back and you start working, right? You could definitely change around, but don't let one hand get a ton better than the other if you're interested in 4-ball juggling. So again, when I'm going with my left hand, I definitely have to concentrate more on the path of the balls. I'm definitely concentrating a lot more on the path of the balls. And my balls haven't collided yet, but you'll find that they're hitting each other a lot. I would not recommend using lacrosse balls when you're learning, because you're going to have balls jumping around everywhere. If I'm using just a beanbag or something like that, beanbag balls or something like that, what's going to happen if I just demonstrate them colliding? I'm going to let me start with a wider pattern. I'm going to narrow it down until they collide. This is going to happen to you a lot. Don't get frustrated. So if I start with kind of a wide pattern and then narrow it until eventually, right, they're going to hit each other and they're both going to fall. You're not going to be able to recover from that, because when they collide, they're both going to go off in strange directions. So don't allow yourself to get frustrated with that. Work on your good hand. get it to 50, 60% proficiency, switch to your non-dominant hand. Work on that non-dominant hand, because that's going to be your key to juggling 4 balls, is getting that non-dominant hand decent. Okay, so let's say you've done that. You've gotten your dominant hand, you've gotten your non-dominant hand reasonably proficient, 80%, 90% proficiency with doing, again, definitely I have to concentrate on this left hand, definitely with doing this kind of motion. And again, once you get the most comfortable height, take it up. Take it up so that you're throwing the balls. If I back up a little bit so you can see that a little bit better, so that instead of, this is maybe my most comfortable height to juggle 2 in one hand, but when I'm juggling 4, I'm going to want to take it higher. So once you get your most comfortable height good, go ahead and take it up so that it is about a foot higher, or nearly a foot higher. Then you can start trying to put 2 hands together. And so the first step, 2 in 1, not too bad. If you think of the second part of the first step is the non-dominant hand, that's tough. But the second full step, putting 2 hands together, is challenging. And there's really 2 ways that you could do this. You can juggle, 2 basic ways to juggle 4 balls. One way is the way I've been showing you, where it's asynchronous. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. The other way is juggling 2 at the same time. So if I do the same thing, I put the gold and the silver in one hand, the blue and the green in the other. If you watch the second way, now that might look easier because it's just visually easier to see what's going on. I find that most people, for me and for most people, it's actually more difficult to juggle that way, to juggle 4 balls that way, than to juggle them asynchronously. But you can work on both ways completely independently, because it's a different feel. It's a very different feel, even though you're essentially doing the same thing. You're juggling 2 in one hand, but it feels very different. So let me talk about that way first, just juggling at the same time, juggling them synchronously. So it's easy to see what's going on because both my hands are doing exactly the same thing at the same time. So if you just watch that for a second. And you can see that I've got a little bit of issue with making sure that I have enough space to get the balls in their pattern, right? I can't cross the center line. If I cross the center line with one ball, there's going to be a collision. So I've really got that problem. And you can really also see what my hands are doing, that outside to inside, being particular to make sure that I'm going to those same 2 points, right? This hand only going to that point, the other hand only going to that point. Watch that one more time. I'm watching particularly what my hands are doing. Right, so that's tough. That is, for me, tougher than doing them asynchronously. The biggest problem I found when you do them asynchronously is just getting that rhythm. And you might have noticed when I very first started the video how I did a little, without throwing it, I just kind of did a little thing like this. It's me just trying to get my rhythm before I actually throw the ball. So I'm trying to get that rhythm that I need, because just getting the balls to go click, 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 click is a little bit tough, instead of going like bum, 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 but to really make sure that they're evenly asynchronous. So that's going to be your big problem. So when you start trying to put 2 hands together, and make sure you've got each hand individually pretty darn good. So when I'm trying to start asynchronously, I've got to think I'm going to start the throw with my dominant hand. So for me, that's my right hand. And I'm really trying to feel that rhythm before I start. So I might go right, left, and then start. Right, and then start the juggle. Watch that start one more time. Because the start is the toughest part. And then once you can kind of fall into a rhythm, it's somewhat easier, right? It's still not going to get easy, but getting the start it's frustrating, because the start is actually the hardest part. You get going, you kind of get into a groove, you get into a timing. But I have found that doing that throw, where you're not actually throwing, you're just pretending to throw, and then you're going to actually throw, right? And then it just helps you to get that rhythm. But I'm not going to kid you, it's tough. Juggling 4 balls is tough. But don't start trying to juggle 5, I would say, until you've mastered just the speed that's required with 4. Although 5 is a different motion, you really need to get that speed down. Your hand, you've got to be able to think quicker. Your throws have to be more precise with 4 versus with 3. Throws are more precise. What your hands are doing is quicker, even though you're throwing higher. You're throwing higher in an attempt to buy yourself a little bit more time. But if you throw too high, then it makes the accuracy of your throws have to be a lot greater. So you have to kind of balance that. So if I try to juggle like all the way up to the ceiling, if you kind of just look at what that looks like and how much more accurate the throws have to be. So it gives me more time. Right? It gives me more time, but the throws have to be more accurate. And you saw what happened there when the balls collide. That's it. No recovery from that. And if I try to juggle, so I'll try to juggle, start at my sort of normal height and then go down to as small as I can go. Then the speed is more difficult. And because the balls are lower down, you don't have as much pathway. And then as soon as I start to bring it down, that reaction time is quick. Let me try that one more time. Right there, I was able to bring it down some, but it's tough. It's really tough to bring that down. So again, you're going to need to be quite proficient with 2 balls in one hand before you put it together, but it's a lot of fun. Juggling 2 balls in one hand, it's a lot of fun. I find it, especially when you're using your dominant hand, to be maybe more relaxing, even than juggling 3. And then once you kind of get this basic pattern, you can juggle in columns, where the balls are just going up. You can reverse the direction. And of course, you can also implement all those things into 4-ball juggling as well. But if your goal is juggling 4 balls, I would suggest don't try those other ways of juggling 2 in one hand. Just stick with this, right? Stick with that. Really get that into your muscle memory, and change around, right? You really want to get that to be as smooth as possible up at about the height that you're going to want to go at when you start juggling 4. So good luck to you all. I think that getting 2 balls in one hand, probably not going to be that much of a problem for you. 2 balls in your offhand probably is going to be pretty tough. But if you have the patience and the persistence to stick with doing your non-dominant hand, getting that 2 in 1, then I think you've got the patience and persistence to get 4. Definitely don't expect it's going to come as fast as doing 3. But the 2 in one hand and your dominant hand, that will probably come as fast. So good luck to everybody. And again, if you want to leave me a tip, there's a link to a PayPal account to do that. And that would be most appreciated. And feel free to like the video, subscribe if you're interested in seeing more things like this. And good luck to you all with 4 balls. Take care.